So I think we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed Alex's talk earlier. And in this session, we're going to listen to Morgan Lapointe from People's Academy Middle Level. And she is going to talk about her work on developing a Genders and Sexualities Alliance at her school and how it has affected student safety and empowerment in her grades 5 through 8. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Morgan. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I used our time at MGI to look at what other schools do for student gender and sexuality alliances and to sort of make some plans for starting one at our school because we haven't had one for a while. And I initially felt like it was almost like a silly use of MGI because it was such a straightforward thing. Like, of course, a school should have a gender and sexuality alliance, but throughout the fall, I actually had coworkers here and there question why it needed to exist. And it started to make me realize that I was glad that I'd spent the time in MGI looking into these groups and why, and setting some context for like the precedent for why they should exist, because I was able to sort of push back. And so in our time together today, I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at like the context and why it's important to have specific affinity groups at schools, and then some of what we're actually doing at People's Academy and what it looks like. So I guess to start, I am, let's see. Yeah, so the big ideas here that sort of led me to look at this in the summer were what we all know, that identity needs are sort of crucial to academic success. And if we take ourselves back to the summer, we were thinking so much about making up the achievement gap and such from the pandemic. And it seems really far away to kind of try to put myself back in that mindset from the summer. But that was definitely where I was at as I planned this project. And what I would like to take some time for now is to kind of look at why the identity needs of queer students are something that requires like special attention in our school communities. So I have two resources that I'm going to suggest we take some time to look at. One is the Vermont Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and the other is the National School Climate Survey from GLSEN. And we'll use like an Atlas protocol, and this is interactive. So I'm gonna ask everyone who's here to sort of jump in, and we'll take a little bit of time to just look through these two resources and describe what we see in the data. We'll take some time after that. We'll move into another round of sort of interpreting what it means and what this suggests, and then taking it a little further for what the implications for schools are. So I'll put 3 links into the chat. One will be for the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Another will be for the National School Climate Survey. And the third link will be just a Jamboard where we can share our thoughts on these 3 different levels. So a couple of things I want to say. One, The youth risk behavior survey talks about risky youth behavior, and that can be, and some of those things are hard to look at. If you'd rather focus on the national, the first link, the climate survey, stay there. If you don't want to see data that can be a little bit more painful to look at. Let's take maybe 5 minutes right now to just look through one or the other, choose either link, and then share on that first slide in the Jamboard some of what you're seeing in the data. So we'll do like 5 minutes, just what are you seeing? Yeah. So we'll take another minute to just kind of look through things, and then we'll move on to thinking what does this mean for our schools and how we should be supporting students at school. And as we move into that round, that's just like the next slide. So just starting to kind of think past what we see in the data and thinking towards what it means.
Are you saying anything? I can't hear anything. I'm wondering
Well, we're just taking some time to look at, oh, I can put more links in. We're just taking some time to look at 3 resources and consider why these are systems that schools have in place. Whoa, sorry, that's all the links in one message. I can separate them out if that's helpful.
Well, I don't know. Let's try it and see what happens. Thank you. I have the 2019 National School Climate Survey is what it showed up.
Last level of kind of thinking through what we're looking at is to think about what our implications are for schools based on what we're seeing. So we can move on to that. So I'll give people like maybe another minute to look at this. I don't want to take too long. And then we'll move on. So thank you everyone for taking some time to look at that. Again, it was, this exercise comes a little bit as a result of experiencing a little bit of pushback, which I wasn't expecting in this process. And so I wanted to sort of set the stage for some of why we do want to provide groups like this. And so especially in the National School Climate Survey, they focus on some of the student supports that schools can offer and how that actually impacts queer students. And I'm going to use the term queer as like an umbrella sort of to include lots of other terms in it. And as I bring my slideshow back up, I focused specifically on just one piece of what schools can do, and that's starting a Genders and Sexualities Alliance. It's only one little thing.
Morgan, I think you're muted.
There we go. I'm back. Thank you, James. Okay. And so we started a Genders and Sexualities Alliance, and that comes from, the evidence for why this is an important one is that at schools with the presence of a GSA, youth report, greater numbers of supportive staff, more accepting peers, and a greater sense of belonging in their school community. And I just want to emphasize how it's only one piece, and more systemic things like inclusive curriculum and examining school policies is also important. But we'll be focusing on this one little piece today. So we started a 5th to 8th grade group. We met weekly. The purpose was to build a sense of belonging amongst students, and it is open to any students identifying as LGBTQIA+, but also to allies and students who are questioning and not sure and interested and curious. The question for my research was, how does this alliance create a climate in which students feel safe and empowered? And those two specific terms come out of some of this data, which shows that students are not always feeling safe and empowered at school. What happens in this group, from talking with lots of other people and looking what other groups do, there's sort of 3 things that this kind of a student group tends to do. There's a lot of socializing, sometimes there's advocacy, and sometimes there's an education component. Like any middle school teacher, my goal was obviously to have kids have a lot of say in what we were doing. And so we don't split this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It really has to do with who's there and what they want. And so even in just this year, we've had some switches from heavy on the advocacy over to now heavy on the socializing, just based on who's in the group. We run our program as an after school group, which means that it has a lot of sessions. We're on our 3rd session this year, and the kids who come change every session. And during my research this summer, I used the Up for Learning model to think about sort of a progression for who holds power in this group and what the relationship between youth and adults will look like. And what I appreciated about their graphic was I'm only in my 2nd year of teaching, makes me kind of an impatient person. I want things to happen quickly. And there's a lot for me to remember about how it can be a slow process to grow into something where we are full partners with each other. And so I would say our group is still very much in the world of trying to get kids consulting on ideas every once in a while, getting them emerging as our partners. And we are not really to full youth leadership of this group yet. Some of the things that we've done this year are some recruitment. We made some amazing posters that hang up around the school, and students have defined each session, they define a new sort of set of norms and things that we do, who we are, what we want to do, and what we won't do. And it changes each time around. This is one set of norms from partway through the year. And you can really see that breakdown of, you know, socializing things, like we have some nice smelling candles that we sometimes light, and that wound up in our norms. And then also some of that more advocacy and ways that we want to solve school issues and address mental health and educate adults, and then also learn about things as a group. So you see that kind of balance of the three different things. And at the beginning of the year, we had this goal of getting kids involved in helping to facilitate the meetings, and more that we got pretty strong into the kid facilitation, and they were really getting into advocacy work. And we have this as an example agenda from our group when they were really feeling heavy on advocacy, and they made this huge list of issues that they were going to address. And then this agenda shows you another week coming back, and after spending an hour and a half total trying to write advocacy letters to people in positions of power at school, the kids made a push for wanting to do more socializing. So this is a student's letter to the principal and the health teacher at school, and they were so passionate about getting involved in advocacy. And then also they felt that thing that we all feel, which is this exhaustion, and how it can be really hard to look at these reports, especially when they come from such a place of deficit and risk. And so we've moved now into a lot more of just socializing and being a fun place to hang out. And so how's it really going? Here are some reports from some students. I have some audio as well that I can play, but a couple of kids just sharing last week how they're feeling about being a part of this group. And so I'm going to figure out how to share this in their voices. This first set of recordings is students responding to the prompt about whether this is something that they look forward to in their week.
I do look forward to the meetings because it's fun and we get to do kind of games and watch movies and also talk about important topics that are good to know, because it's they're aware pronouns and all of it, and it's you're here, people want you, you're okay. Me and my friends have talked about it in kind of that sort of way, but not really having a group of people an after school activity.
When you say talked about it, do you mean specific, just identity in general, or do you mean more specifically gender and sexuality? And how you know
kind of
stuff?
all of it.
Yeah.
And sort of thing, and just how it just comes up in topics and stuff. But this is my old school didn't offer that sort of place here, so.
And then in talking with students about their experiences, we also started to talk about whether it's making a difference having this group. We haven't had one at school before, so it's pretty easy to compare it back to past years. So the next couple of recordings are kids responding to the question, is it making a difference to have this group around this year? Do you think it makes a difference? Honestly, do you think it makes a difference for a school to have, just for it to exist?
Yeah.
How do you think it affects your experience?
People have a place where people understand and could be going through the same thing, but also having fun times and having games and stuff like that can help you ease in and make new friends, I guess.
It definitely makes a difference because the school's more aware.
Yeah.
So it's not somebody will just be walking down the halls and then another person just making fun of them.
Right. that's what I have prepared for us. To sort of summarize, we started this group because we have a lot of evidence that queer students have more, what am I trying to say? Queer students experience or report a lot of feelings of not feeling safe at school and having to even skip school for feeling unsafe. And so providing a space at a school can be a way that we can make a difference. It's one small step. And students are participating through after school, and they report that it is something that they're starting to look forward to in a week, and it helps them makes a difference compared to past years. That's what I have for you. Do people have questions or want to share what they're thinking about?
We have a pretty small group, so I think we can just jump in if you have a particular question. I know I have a question. Morgan, how many students overall participated in the Alliance over the past semester? And how many regulars did you have?
So overall, we've had, I think it's 22 students participate, and there's a core group of 5 that have been participating all year, but each month and a half long after school session is consistent. So like the attendance is consistent for 6 to 8 weeks, and then it changes.
I actually have a follow-up question. To what extent, I don't know if you've done this or have made it's anecdotal in the way you can feel this, but from your perspective, how do you think it has changed the culture and atmosphere of the school overall? And to what extent do other students know that this alliance exists and it's been kind of advertised and it's out there in the school community?
It's out there. I think most kids know that it exists. We've got everyone, there's a lot of posters up and stuff like that, making a difference. I think there's a lot of increased visibility, just like the presence of the group it's on. It means it's on after school brochures. It means that it's in announcements each week for where to go, things like that. And I think that's kind of an interesting component. There's been some changes as a result of that advocacy work that came in the fall. And students connecting with different teachers and such about making some changes to policies. But I also think, like, honestly, as I don't know where I'm at right now in the middle of the winter, I feel very much like it's a very small drop in a bucket, and that there's a lot of systemic change that will be more important.
Hey, Morgan. Thank you for this presentation. It was really well put together. My question to you was, of your students who participate, how many of them actually, identify as LGBTQIA, and how many are there just as supporters and advocates of that community? And what sort of interventions do you have? Schools could be an incredibly hurtful place. So what sort of interventions does your school have to make sure these students who participate in your group are protected?
Yeah. So let's see, the first part of the question, how many students identify? Part of what's interesting about a middle school group is there's so much still defining their own identity. So we have a lot of students in our group who are very curious and unsure. And so just, they're like, a big question that comes up a lot in our meetings is like, how do you know? And that's a fun conversation to have and to let students have with each other, to be able to make that space. But our core group is mostly queer identifying students.
Okay.
And I think one of the challenges in that we have sort of a tight friend group that makes up the core of our group. So it's, in some ways, it's sort of their social space, and it's not necessarily, at the moment, it doesn't necessarily have a lot of different friend groups coming together in it. So that's some room for growth. And then as far as our school's ways to help prevent harm to these students, wow, I mean, that's a work in progress, and definitely something that I'm having trouble thinking of specific answers. I mean, you know, we have anti-discrimination and harassment policies. I think if you ask the students who come to the group, there's a lot of work that remains to be done.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
I have a question to follow up on something you just said. You talked about having kind of like a tight friend group that's kind of the core of your group. And I'm wondering if you had any conflict within the group, or when you start to add, you know, members outside of that friendship group, if you have any thoughts about how to navigate that. And the reason I ask is because two of my colleagues and I started a GSA this year. And we actually started the spring of last year, we brought in a small core group to kind of help us design it and figure out what is this going to be, what is it going to look like. And then maybe a month or so into this year, we opened it up more publicly, and we lasted one meeting and it just imploded because people didn't feel safe with the people that joined the group. And so maybe that's just a, you know, tiny school problem, but just wondering if you've had any conflict or thought about how to navigate that within your group.
Yeah. We had, so last spring, a group of rising 8th graders helped to sort of like frame the initial structure of the group. And that's kind of what I came to MGI with. And interestingly, most of that initial group is not participating. They're big fans. They like come check in with us to see how it's going, but they're not coming to that group. And my understanding, as best I can, of what's happening inside these 13-year-old brains is that it's because the group that comes, it is some different friend group that they don't want to hang out with each other. Yeah, so it's definitely how to be a group that is able to feel safe for lots of people is, I don't have an answer yet. The other thing that's interesting, I don't know what your age range is at school, but sometimes the people who aren't so we have like this tight 8th grade friend group, and then we have kids coming in from like 5th and 6th grade, and they don't interact a lot during the school day. So that in some ways kind of helps it feel less like it's, you know, like just for one crew. But yeah, it's hard. I wish I had more. Yeah. Crystal has a question.
Yes. How do you maneuver around the idea of wanting to start a group, but the teachers and staff are pretty much against that? They feel like it's more so condoning it. How do you get around that?
Mm-hmm. I haven't faced that exact challenge. I had lots of support in starting the group, and then I had people asking. I had colleagues who wondered why it wasn't more of just like a general kindness group or general social justice for all issues. So it wasn't the same issue of nobody was worried about condoning queer identity, but people were worried about why this group of students got special support. And that's kind of why I started this off looking at some of those reports, because that's what I've pointed my colleagues to, is like this group, like look at how we report, you know, look at how this group reports their feelings of like safety at school, and then look at what if people find helps them feel safe. So that's what I've found useful. I mean, the reports are flawed, but they kind of help to rationalize it. But gosh, I don't know about the condoning piece.
I guess this is to piggyback on Crystal's question. Did you get any pushback from the community in general outside of the school?
Yeah, Melissa just posted in the chat something that's worth noting. We have a really supportive administration who, you know, sort of a related but not the exact same piece. Those, like many of us in our school have, you know, we see Andrea with it, have flags in our classrooms, pride flags, Black Lives Matter flags. And we're in a district where if we get pushback from the community on those things, which we do, we as teachers don't need to be the ones to handle that pushback. Our admin will handle that for us, and we don't have to bear that. So that's just sort of my way of illustrating. We have a really supportive administration. But as far as community, we don't, you notice none of my pictures show any of the students. Most of them have no interest in having anyone know specifically who's in the group. And some students are not, like when they get picked up by their parents or family and go home, they're not saying, oh, I just came from Gender and Sexuality Alliance. They're like, I was at after school, and they kind of leave it at that. So there is certainly community pushback and ways that we do need to make sure to be being careful and respectful of students' concerns around that.
And this is just clarity for Crystal's question, and she used the term condone. And Crystal, I thought that was really interesting how you framed your question. So just for clarity, are you stating that the administration at your school thinks it refers to being part of the LGBT community is a choice? And if you have this group, that you condone that choice?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why I have not, none of my students and only a few of my coworkers know that I am engaged to a woman. And I'm one of those teachers that all the kids like. And so I didn't want it to come across as, maybe I'm pushing it on them, or because they are so impressionable at this age, I don't want them to feel like, oh, because Ms. Hall is doing it, I want to do it. And so just the things that I hear my coworkers say, not knowing my sexuality, it's always negative. These kids don't know what they're doing. They'll try anything. It's so nasty, it's so disgusting. So I'm a little nervous because I do want to do that, because some of the kids that, not knowing about me, they come and talk to me about certain things because they say it's so easy to talk and I'm so non-judgmental. I just don't want that, like you say, the pushback from, I'm not even going to just say the community, with just the community within the school. And so then at that point, what can we do to make sure or ensure that the kids are safe? Because I'm in a country area, so they have a certain mindset, and if it's not what society says, if not what society says, but if it's not how they feel, it doesn't matter about, anything else. In their mind, it's man is supposed to be with woman, and that's it. And we're not even a Christian school, but just listening to some of my coworkers. So that's why they don't even know about me.
Thank you for sharing that. That was powerful. So thank you.
I think something, Crystal, that, I think I can't connect with all of the pieces that you're talking about, but one thing that I do think about, and I wonder, like, for someone like Andrea, who's also started this at school, and I remember, Andrea, you talking about this last summer, but the ways that our own identities comes into our groups, and I didn't talk about that in my presentation at all either. That's something I can connect to, and I share with students sometimes that I identify as queer, but sometimes I don't. In our group, I talk about it when asked, but that I don't have like an answer, and that's not something that I've been able to find a lot of support on, like formally in the literature, but I can talk about my own experience of sometimes trying to use it as something I connect with, and also completely identifying with that concern that, I don't know, sometimes I feel like I share too much or something. And so I'm just trying to say, that resonates with me.
Crystal and Maureen, you bring up a really good point. I wonder if having a co-leader as an ally would make a difference. And I don't know the literature in this, especially in communities where being queer is something that's thought of negatively, or people look at it from a hostile perspective. I'm just wondering if it maybe having an ally. I think having a strong administration that clearly supports the group is almost it's almost essential. So I don't have an answer. I just have questions about that.
Okay, so just a little background. I'm in a community, and this is not where I live, but this is just where I work. I'm in a community where it's okay to sleep with your coworker's husband, or, it's okay for that, but it's not okay to be queer, if that helps.
Yeah, Rebecca, I think that's a really important point. That concern about identity that I brought up, that probably wouldn't be. Anyway, I wanted to point to Rebecca's comment in the chat. Do straight people have to worry about sharing too much, or is that specific to some? I will say I have a co-leader on all of this, who we have pretty similar identities, but that just having a co-leader in general helps a ton, someone to bounce ideas off of and to share challenges with. But Crystal, what you're sharing also helps, I think, me to remember the incredible support of just being in a state like Vermont. Even if my community has some pushback, I'm in a state that has a lot of support for queer folks and for progressive kind of ideas.
And I think our state does too, because I'm in Georgia. However, in certain counties and smaller rural areas, it's not as much.
Yeah. Well, as our time comes to a close, I'm reminded of our courageous conversation stuff and not really coming to any sort of closure, right? Expect non-closure. Here we are with just more questions. But thank you all for being here.
Yes, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. And also, I think the surveys that Morgan put in the chat, it's data, and it's good to use data when you're talking to other individuals, when you're trying to put together an alliance like this at your school. Sometimes they're convinced by it, other times they may not be, but I think it's important to show them that. So again, thank you, Morgan, and thank you for everyone for coming. I hope you have the rest of the day is a good one. Please, at 11, please go ahead and join whatever presentation that you're interested in. Take care, everyone.